At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. To a hyper-empathetic telepathic squid person, a migraine is a thermonuclear detonation inside a public library. Dr. Emma Invante grasped this concept now. She understood it with terrifying clarity. She crouched behind a reinforced plasteel desk, a sleek, hollow-like device called a synaptic bridge clutched to her chest, while the universe around her dissolved into screaming biological madness. The Terran embassy aboard the Concordant Spire usually functioned as a place of quiet, bureaucratic friction, a place where people spoke in hushed tones and walked on soft floors to avoid disturbing the locals. It served as a bastion of fragile peace, maintained by strict regulations and heavy insulation. Right now, the room resembled a mosh pit of visceral horror.
"Kill it, Doc! For the love of God, kill it!"
The scream ripped from Marine Sergeant Korb. He knelt by the blast-proof door, clamping his hands over his ears, though the sound resided inside his skull, a jagged, screeching feedback loop that tasted like chewed aluminum foil and hatred.
"I can't!"
Imran yelled back, her voice cracking. Her fingers slipped on the smooth, sweat-slick interface of the bridge.
"The feedback loop fried the controls! The broadcast is cycling! The power source is sealed!"
Imran peered over the desk edge, wincing as a wave of psychic static washed over her. The Oline diplomats, tall, elegant creatures with skin that glowed like mother of pearl, thrashed on the floor, their natural luminescence, a soothing communication tool, strobed in violent, erratic bursts of bruised purple and sickly, gangrenous green. Their eyes, large and filled with the serene wisdom of the consensus, rolled back into their skulls. They seized, foaming at the mouth with a silvery, viscous fluid that smelled of scorched cinnamon and distress. The problem, Imran realized with a pit of absolute ice in her stomach, stemmed from the grief. The experiment was meant to be simple, innocuous, a visual demonstration of human trauma processing for the Oline High Council, who failed to understand why humans refrained from constant screaming. The Olines lived in a state of shared emotion. A sad thought became a burden shared by all. They looked at humans who endured wars, loss, and traffic jams without collapsing, and assumed the species consisted of empty shells. She had bypassed the safety locks in her suppressor ring, the obligatory noise-canceling headphone for the soul that all humans wore on the station for a clear reading. Staff usually conducted such experiments in the lead-lined, size-shielded bunkers where the humans slept and showered, deep in the station's dead zones. But the High Council requested a live demonstration in the atrium to verify the data. Sheer scientific hubris caused this disaster. She pulled up a memory of her late husband, David. A small memory, the way he tapped his pen against his teeth when he thought. She focused on the feeling of loss that image invoked, intending to project it as a simple, sterile graph on a screen. She failed to account for the Oline biosynaptic architecture, which acted as a stadium-sized amplifier. The station was more than metal and plastic. The station was grown, the walls lived, the computers functioned as nervous systems, and right now, the station felt her repressed, concentrated grief at a volume of 11. The sudden sharp crack echoed through the room, louder than a gunshot. Imran flinched and covered her head. A light fixture exploded above them and showered the desk in sparks and glass.
"My ring!"
A junior aide screamed, ripping the smoking metal band from his neck.
"It's cooking my skin!"
The suppressor rings on the other embassy staff sparked, their circuitry overloaded by the psychic scream that tore through the local atmosphere. One by one, they shorted out. The smell of frying electronics and singed hair saturated the room.
"Rings are down!"
A technician shouted. He threw his device across the room, where it skittered into a wall that shuddered on impact.
"We're exposed! Everyone's exposed! The safeties are gone!"
The result struck instantly. If Imran's grief functioned as a solo act, the sudden exposure of 50 stressed-out, terrified, adrenaline-pumped humans became a discordant orchestra of mental static. The embassy walls literally rippled. The organic paneling groaned, sounding like a well dying in a cathedral. Oling guards armed with bioplasma rifles staggered into the room. They held their heads, firing wildly into the ceiling, their own nervous systems jacked by the raw, chaotic noise of human panic.
Get down!
A heavy hand grabbed the back of Imran's lab coat and yanked her down, just as a bolt of superheated plasma scorched the air where her head had just resided a microsecond before. The heat blistered the varnish on the desk. She looked up into the face of Colonel Jaden Slater. He looked annoyingly calm. In a room where the architecture screamed and the diplomats suffered grand mal seizures, Slater looked like he waited for a slightly delayed bus. He was a slab of a man, scarred and weathered, with eyes that had witnessed events capable of breaking a lesser mind. "Report, Doctor," Slater said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble cut through the screeching. His expression remained unmoved as a decorative plant in the corner withered and died instantly from the psychic shockwave. "I broke the diplomats," Imran gasped, clutching the bridge like a lifeline. "I think I broke the room, too. The station, it's reacting to our minds. It's a biofeedback loop. I opened a door I can't close, Slater. The station amplifies us, and we amplify the station." Slater glanced over the desk. An Oling guard collapsed near them, vomiting that silvery fluid, overwhelmed by Sergeant Corp's raw fear. The guard clawed at his own face, trying to dig the noise out. "They aren't attacking," Slater noted. He checked the charge on his stun baton with the casual demeanor of a man checking his watch. "They're incapacitating themselves. It's an allergic reaction."
They're empathetic receivers, Slater. We're broadcasting on a frequency that liquefies their brains. We are literally thinking them into a coma.
"Great," Slater said, turning to the rest of the room. He stood fully exposed to the chaos. He resembled a granite statue amidst a sea of flailing limbs.
"Listen up. We're leaving. Locals are having a bad reaction to our vibes. Evac to life support module. Move, move, move!"
Undersecretary Pym, a diplomat, wailed from under a table. He clutched a briefcase as if it contained the secret to immortality.
"This is a diplomatic incident. We need to stabilize them. Regulations dictate de-escalation."
Slater grabbed the diplomat by the back of his expensive suit and hauled him to his feet. Pym weighed 200 pounds. Slater lifted him like a sack of laundry. "Sir, you are currently a walking sonic weapon," Slater growled, his face inches from Pym's. "Your concern kills them. Your panic hits them like a shotgun blast. If you want to help, get your loud brain off this station. Now move." The retreat resembled a chaotic stumble through a haunted gut rather than a tactical withdrawal. The corridors of the Concordant Spire felt slick and warm, pulsing with a gentle rhythmic light that mimicked a heartbeat. Now they convulsed. The floor heaved under their feet like a diaphragm of a sobbing giant. The lights flickered in time with the erratic heart rates of the terrifying apes running through the halls. Slater took point, moving with a fluid predatory grace. He kept his weapon holstered. He had no need for it. He just projected a focused intent of "get out of my way." Imran ran behind him, her lungs burning. Slender, graceful beings carrying musical instruments and data crystals crumpled against the walls as Slater passed. They felt a tsunami of controlled violence. They fell, clutching their chests, gasping for air that felt too thick to breathe.
"Don't touch the walls!"
Imran yelled to the group.
"The biomatter is reactive. It'll try to digest the source of the pain."
Well, that's just fantastic,"
muttered Chef Brahm, a burly man who ran with a set of high-grade knives strapped to his belt.
"First the souffle collapses, now the hallway wants to eat me. Keep moving."
Slater barked over his shoulder.
"The blast doors!
Corp shouted from the rear guard.
The ceiling! The station tries to cut us off!"
Ahead, the corridor sphincter-like biolocks contracted. The station attempted to compartmentalize the infection. It tried to pinch them off like a gangrenous limb. The opening shrank rapidly, its muscular rim pulsing with a sickly yellow light.
"Not on my watch."
Slater growled. He reached the closing aperture. Most people would see a door. Slater saw a muzzle. There was no keypad. The Olings used emotional passcodes. Slater lacked the passcode for open, but he possessed the universal passcode for I'm not stopping. He jammed his armored fingers into the mechanism's soft, pulsing rim.
Colonel, don't!
Imran yelled and skidded to a halt.
That's synaptic tissue! It's going to react! It feels everything!
It's in the way.
Slater grunted. He planted his boots on the slick floor and heaved. His biceps strained against the uniform's combat fabric. The door shuddered. Slater used more than strength. He used pain. He poured his frustration, his physical exertion, and his stubborn refusal to be crushed into the touch. He channeled every ounce of stubborn dad fixing the plumbing energy he possessed. The door screamed, a wet, tearing sound that made Imran's molars vibrate and recoiled. It flinched away from him like a hand from a hot stove. The sheer abrasive texture of his unyielding will overwhelmed it.
Go, go!
Slater roared, holding the shuddering flesh metal open with his shoulders. The door spasmed against his back and tried to crush him, but he held it with a grimace that sat halfway between a smile and a snarl. The embassy staff scrambled through and dove into the Independent Life Support Module, LSM, docked at the spur's end. It was a detachable embassy annex built by humans for humans, cold, sterile, and dead. Safe. Imran scrambled through last, dragging her equipment case, which felt like a ton of dead weight. She looked back at Slater. For a second, their eyes met. Slater's face was a landscape of sweat and grit, but his eyes were clear. He shoved himself backward and tumbled through the opening just as the sphincter slammed shut with a guillotine's wet force.
Seal it!
Slater barked. He hit the deck and rolled to his feet in one fluid motion. The LSM's heavy mechanical, thankfully inorganic airlock spun shut. The wheel turned, the bolts engaged with a reassuring metallic thud clink. The only sound remaining was the ragged panting of the survivors and the hum of the air recyclers. Then came the clunk. A deep, reverberating sound shook the floor plates and rattled the teeth of everyone on board.
What was that?
The technician, a young kid named Rhodey, asked, trembling. His face matched the color of old milk.
That sounded bad. That sounded like finality.
Slater walked to the viewport and wiped sweat from his forehead. He looked out into the starry gulf.
Explosive bolts,
Slater said. His voice held no surprise.
They didn't wait for us to undock. They amputated us.
Imran joined him at the window. Outside, the concordant spire receded rapidly. The station's beautiful, organic curves looked inflamed, the lights pulsing an angry, bruised red. It resembled an infected wound in the fabric of space. As she watched, the Oling Defense Fleet, sleek, grown ships that looked like shark cartilage and silver, broke their arrangement. They sent no hells to the module. They circled it. Weapons ports flared with building energy, glowing like angry eyes.
"They're surrounding us,"
Imran whispered, her hand going to her mouth.
"Slater, look at the spread. That's a containment grid."
Slater crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. He watched the ships maneuver with a critical eye, calculating vectors and firing arcs.
They aren't just surrounding us, Doc,
Slater said softly.
Look at the vector. They're establishing a quarantine perimeter. They're treating us like a biohazard spill, and they're getting the bleach ready.
The life support module's comms room was a cramped box of brushed steel and analog stitches. Human tech, comforting and cold. The air carried the metallic smell of scrubbers, stale coffee, and sharp fear. The life support module's comms room was a cramped box of brushed steel and analog switches. Human tech, comforting and cold. The air carried the metallic smell of scrubbers, stale coffee, and sharp fear. Imran sat at the main console, her fingers tapping rapidly over the bridge's keys, analyzing the disaster logs. She shook, but the work gave her focus. Slater stood behind her, his eyes fixed on the screen where the red icons of the alien fleet closed in like a noose.
Talk to me, Doc,
Slater said, leaning over her shoulder.
Why aren't we dead yet?
Those ships have plasma lances that could boil this tin can in a microsecond.
Why the hesitation?
"They're afraid,"
Imran said, looking at the data streams that scrolled down her screen.
Slater, look at this. The reading from the moment my suppressor failed. The spike indicates volume and density. English Vontae. I shoot things for a living. I don't do theoretical xenobiology. Imran turned the screen toward him. The Olings are a consensus race. They share feelings like a distributed network. If one feels pain, they all feel it. If the pain becomes too great, they shut down to protect the network. But humans, she tapped the screen where a jagged, chaotic red line spiked off the chart. We hoard. Compartmentalization, Slater said, nodding slowly. We lock it down. Exactly. We take trauma, grief, fear, and we shove it into a little box in our heads so we can keep trying or driving or shooting. We function despite the signal. To them, that looks like a symptom of something terrible. To them, that looks like a symptom of some terrible latency. Well, why did it happen now? Slater asked, his eyes narrowing. We've been on this station for 6 months. We take the rings off to sleep. In the shielded quarters, Imran corrected quickly. The sleeping barracks are lined with lead and... In the shielded quarters, Imran corrected quickly. The sleeping barracks are lined with lead inside dampening mesh, Faraday cages for the soul. We shower there, we sleep there. It's the only place we're allowed to be naked, but the council wanted the demo in the atrium, in the open. I turned off the suppressor in an unshielded zone. Slater rubbed his chin. So, we've been walking around with tactical nukes strapped to our necks, and we only take them off in the bomb shelter. And you just detonated one in the lobby. Basically, yes. Slater looked at the fleet disposition. Explain the density part. They think we're carriers, Imran said, her voice trembling as the realization truly hit her. To them, a mind that carries that much pain without collapsing acts as a biological paradox. It's like seeing someone walk around with a tactical nuke strapped to their chest, the timer counting down, and they just ignore it. They think we're infected with a cognitive pathogen. So they think we're sick, Slater mused. No, Slater. They think we are the disease. Imran looked up at him, her eyes wide. We just inadvertently prove that we can walk around with enough mental anguish to kill their entire species, and we don't even cry about it. Congratulations, Colonel. You just started a war with the galaxy's deadliest creatures because we're too emotionally constipated to process our feelings. Slater stared at her. The heavy quiet stretched for a long moment. Then a slow, dry smile tugged at his mouth's corner. It looked wolfish. He looked back at the fleet on the screen. So, they're terrified, he said. They are petrified, Slater. Literally. They are physically hurting just looking at us. Well, good, Slater said, checking the load in his magazine with a satisfying click. Fear makes people stupid. We can work with stupid. Slater, this isn't a tactical puzzle. Imran snapped and stood. It's a misunderstanding of fundamental biology. We need to explain it to them. It's a siege, Doc, Slater corrected, his voice hardening. And in a siege, you use whatever ammunition you have, even if that ammunition is existential dread. Now, see if you can get me a line to that flagship. I want to hear them say it. The main screen in the module's center flickered to life. The image was grainy, struggling against the massive interference that radiated from the unshielded human minds on board. Every human on the ship acted as a broadcasting antenna of anxiety, creating a soup of static. High-voice Ula appeared. She looked awful. Her skin was a dull, ashy gray, stripped of its pearlescent sheen. She trembled visibly, surrounded by medical attendants who massaged her temples and injected her with calming agents. She was aboard the flagship, the Star Hymnal. Do not speak, Ula whispered. Do not speak. Ula whispered, her voice amplified by the ship's systems, but weak. Do not project. Your silence screams. It hurts the air. High voice. Imran stepped forward, her hands raised in a universal peace gesture. Please listen. It was an accident. We can't explain. Our minds are structured differently. You are the undead. Ula interrupted, flinching as if Imran's words were physical blows.
We have felt the texture of your souls. You are broken things that refuse to die. You carry infinite pain, yet you function. It is an abomination against the consensus.
It's called coping, Imran snapped, her frustration boiling over. It's how we survive. It's not a virus. It's a survival mechanism. It's a plague. Ula shrieked, her composure cracking. We cannot allow the infection to spread to the homeworld.
If the consensus were to touch the mind of a single human soldier,
she shuddered and looked at Slater with distinct horror.
The galaxy would weep itself into a coma. You are monsters of the abyss. You are walking graveyards.
Slater stepped into the frame. He was a black hole of discipline. He stood there, radiating the calm, cold menace of a man who had seen too many battlefields and had buried too many friends. So, what's the play, Ula? Slater asked. His voice sounded flat, devoid of the emotional harmonics the Orleans relied on. Ula recoiled and pressed herself back into her command chair.
Quarantine. Absolute sterilization. We cannot board you. The risk of containment is too high. The star hymnal charges its primary lance. You have 1 solar hour to make your peace with your chaotic blackness.
You're gonna vaporize unarmed diplomats? Slater asked, raising an eyebrow. That sounds unenlightened. Sounds like fear to me.
Burning a virus is sanitation, not murder.
Ula wept, silver tears running down her face.
We do this to save the soul of the galaxy.
The screen cut to black. The reflection of the terrified crew stared back at themselves. Slater turned to the room. The 45 surviving humans, engineers, marines, diplomats, and cooks, looked at him. They were terrified. The rings were gone. The room felt thick with the sludge of their anxiety. You could almost taste the metallic flavor of adrenaline.
All right, listen up.
Slater's voice snapped like a whip and cut through the murmurs.
You heard the lady. We have 1 hour before they try to microwave us.
We're dead,
a young corporal, barely out of training, muttered. He sat on the floor with his head in his hands, rocking back and forth.
We're in a life raft against a dreadnought. We can't fight that. I've never even fired my rifle in anger.
Stand up, Marine.
Slater ordered. His command bypassed the brain and went straight to the spine. The corporal stood, blinking. Slater walked to the room's center.
Doug Vontae gave me the sit rep. They aren't shooting us yet because their ships are grown. Their targeting computers use organic synaptic tissue. They hesitate because their own ship is afraid to touch us.
Imran blinked. The thought was new, but it made perfect sense.
The biosynaptic interface. If it locks onto us, it has to perceive us to target us, and perceiving us hurts.
Exactly, Slater said and paced like a caged tiger. Their guns have feelings. We can use that.
Use it how?
Sergeant Korb asked and stepped forward. He looked shaken, but ready to work.
We don't have weapons, Colonel. This is a diplomatic module. We have stun batons and a flare gun. That's a poor arsenal.
We are the weapons,
Slater said, his eyes scanning the room, locking with every person there.
Without those things, every single one of you is a walking, talking jammer pod. You are loud, you are messy, and you are complicated. That is our electrical countermeasure.
We need a plan to escape, Slater, Imran said, trying to ground the science. We have repair shuttles in the bay, but they're unshielded. If we launch, the point defense cannons will shred us before we clear the hole. We're sitting ducks.
The PDCs might have a panic attack,
Slater said. He looked at Imran.
You say we compartmentalize. We put things in boxes.
Yes, it's a defense mechanism.
And that's what scares them. The box.
No, Imran realized, her mind racing to keep up with Slater's tactical leap. The box keeps us invisible. The content of the box scares them, but when the suppressors broke, the boxes leaked. That's what happened in the embassy. Uncontrolled leakage. Noise.
So, Slater said, leaning over the table, his knuckles white. We need to control the leak. We need to focus the noise. We don't need to be louder. We need to be specific.
You want to weaponize all trauma? Imran asked, horrified and fascinated.
I want to survive, Doc, Slater said. And right now, being a psychological nightmare is the only card we have. We won't just leak. We'll build pressure, and then we'll fire it like a cannon.
Chef Brahm raised his hand slowly.
Colonel, I have a lot of repressed anger about the risotto incident of '08. Is that useful?
Slater looked at the large man.
Brim, if you can make an alien warlord cry by thinking about rice, you are my new favorite artillery piece.
On the bridge of the Star Hymnal, the air tasted of copper and lavender, the scent of distress. The lighting was low, pulsing with a rhythmic anxiety. Counselor Merwin knelt on the command deck, her forehead pressed against the ship's warm, fleshy floor. She was smaller than Ula, her skin a soft pale blue. She shook, not from fear, but with aftershocks. "Report, Counselor," Ula demanded from the captain's dais. "You touched the source in the embassy. Is the corruption total? All they lost?" Merwin raised her head. Her eyes were wide, dark pools that seemed to hold too much depth. "It was not corruption, High Voice. Do not speak heresy," Ula hissed, clutching her robes. "I felt the chaotic abyss. I felt the silence that bites. It felt cold." "No," Merwin whispered. She stood, her movements fluid but heavy, as if she walked underwater. "I touched the mind of the female Vante and the male Slater. It did not feel like chaos. It felt like structure." The bridge crew paused. The ship's organic walls seemed to lean in to listen, the capillaries and the bioluminescent panels pulsing faster.
Structure?
A gunnery officer asked, his hand hovering over a nervous-looking firing nodule that trembled under his fingers. "How can chaos have structure?" "Heavy structure," Merwin said, struggling for words in the Oline harmonic language. "They taste like battery acid and iron. They carry wounds that would stop an Oline heart instantly, but they do not stop. They build walls inside themselves, great, terrible walls of gray stone. They lock the monsters in the basement, and then they live in the house above." "That is a disease. That is the disease," Ula spat. "To hide feeling is to lie to the universe. It is deceit. It is living a falsehood." "Is it?" Merwin asked softly, and looked out the viewport at the tiny human module that drifted in the dark. "Or is it strength? They do not break, High Voice. They endure. I felt a concept. I cannot translate it perfectly. Refusal." "Refusal?" Ula tested the word as if it were a poison. "The will to exist purely, to deny the universe the satisfaction of your end," Merwin said, shivering. "It is beautiful and terrifying. It is a fire that burns without consuming the wood." "It is a pathogen," Ula declared and turned away, unable to bear the thought. "And we will not be seduced by the madness of monsters. Deploy the dissonance probes. If they hide behind walls, we will tear the walls down. Force them to feel everything. Let them drown in their own toxicity. We will burst their boxes and let the pressure kill them." The dissonance probes looked like silver leeches the size of coffins. They rocketed from the Star Hymnal and slammed into the life support module's hull with a series of dull, sickening thuds. Inside, the impact was both audible and psychic. "They're latching on," Corp yelled, checking the sensors. "Hull contact, sectors 4, 5, and 9.
Suddenly, the air in the module grew heavy. It felt like a change in emotional gravity, not pressure. A high-pitched whine, just on hearing's edge, began to drill into their skulls.
"Oh, God!" A diplomat gasped and dropped to her knees. She clutched her chest, her face crumpling. "Oh, God! I can't do this." Imran felt it hit her like a tidal wave. The dissonance pulse. It was designed to shatter mental barriers, a frequency that dissolved compartmentalization. Suddenly, the box opened. The lid flew off. Imran was no longer in the module. She was in a hospital room 3 years ago. She watched the flat line of a heart monitor. The overpowering smell of antiseptic filled her senses. The grief she had carefully managed, the sorrow she had processed and filed away, came rushing back as if it were happening right now. The freshness of the pain blinded her. She gasped. Tears streamed down her face instantly. Her knees hit the deck. "David," she sobbed. Around her, the room dissolved into chaos. Marines curled into fetal position, sobbing about lost squads and mistakes made years ago. Chef Bram fell against the bulkhead and slid down. "The lasagna," he wept, tears streaming into his beard. "I used cheddar. My grandmother never forgave me. The shade, the texture was all wrong." It was psychological vivisection. The Oleans weaponized empathy. They forced the humans to feel the sum total of their life's pain all at once, without the filter of time or distance.
Make it stop!
Someone screamed.
Please! Make it stop!
Slater fell to one knee. He grunted, a sound like a heavy door slamming. His teeth clenched so hard Imran thought they might crack. His eyes squeezed shut, veins bulged in his neck, thick as cords. Imran watched him through a blur of tears. She knew Slater's file. She knew what his box contained. Operations that went bad, civilians he couldn't save, men he had ordered to their deaths. It was a mountain of black iron, enough to crush a soul. Slater breathed it in. It was a ragged, shuddering breath, like an engine trying to turn over in the cold. "No," Slater growled. He forced his eyes open. They were bloodshot, furious, and terrifyingly lucid. He stood. He looked like he was lifting a planet on his shoulders. He walked to the screaming technician near the console. He grabbed the man by the collar and slapped him across the face. The sound was sharp, real, physical. It cut through the psychic sludge.
Box it up,
Slater bellowed. His voice was a thunderclap in the weeping room.
You do not do this now. You grieve later. Right now, you work.
He turned to the Marines.
Corb, on your feet.
Corb curled up, shaking.
"I can't, sir. I see them. I see the squad."
They're dead, Corb.
Slater roared, grabbing the sergeant and hauling him up.
And you are alive. Do not disrespect them by dying on your knees. That pain is not new. You know that pain. It is an old friend. Put it in the box and lock the damn lid. We are building pressure, soldier. Don't let it leak. Let it build.
Slater's sheer force of will was contagious. He acted as an external anchor. He projected his own discipline so hard it created a local bubble of reality. He screamed at the universe to shut up, and the universe listened.
Marines!
Slater roared, pointing to the airlock.
Suit up! Get out there and cut those leeches off my hull!
Corb, tears still streaming down his face, snapped into a reflex drilled into him by years of abuse and training. He grabbed a plasma cutter.
Aye, sir. Moving. Bram, get up. The lasagna is forgiven. Get to the airlock.
Imran dragged herself up the console's side. Her head pounded, her heart broke, but Slater's voice gave her something to hold on to. She wiped her face with a shaking hand and looked at the biomonitors.
"My God,"
she whispered. "What?" Slater asked, moving to her side. He was pale, sweating profusely, but he functioned. He held himself together with a stubborn refusal to yield.
"Look at the readings, Slater, when you order them to focus. Look."
On the screen, the neural output of the Marines outside fell to diminish. It spiked, but it was a dense, oscillating wall inside of chaotic static.
"The dissonance probes," Imran said, tapping the glass. "They're overheating."
"Why?"
"Because you didn't stop the emotion. You compressed it. You ordered them to repress it harder. The probes tried to pull the signal out, but the shield, our compartmentalization, pulls back. It creates a feedback loop in the other direction. To the probes, our minds feel like sandpaper on an exposed nerve. We're grinding them down. The pressure inside the box is getting too high for them to read."
Imran looked at Slater with a newfound awe.
"The weapon isn't grief, Slater. It's the structure we build to hold it. The human paradox isn't that we feel pain. It's that the heavier the burden, the stronger the walls we build to carry it.
A loud clang reverberated through the hull. Corb's voice crackled over the comms, breathless and victorious.
Probes are down, Colonel. We cut them loose. They kind of exploded when we got close, sir. Like they couldn't handle the proximity.
Good work, Corb, Slater said. Get back inside before you freeze.
Slater looked at the tactical map. The star hymnal was 20 minutes from firing. The red countdown timer mocked them.
We can't just defend, Slater said. We need to hit them. Can we jam their main gun?
Imran looked at the bridge in her hand.
We can't jam it with noise. They'll just filter it out. We need a signal that they can't process, something that freezes their biosynaptic pathways.
She looked at Slater's flat, hard expression. She looked at the Marines, wiping tears away and checking weapons.
We need to broadcast the combat focus, Imran said. The specific neural pattern. We need to broadcast the combat focus, Imran said. The specific neural pattern you use to shove the horror aside and pull the trigger. If I can amplify that, if I can get everyone on this ship to synchronize on that feeling.
You want to teach civilians to be sociopaths? Slater asked.
No,
Imran said, unspooling her headset's wires.
I want to teach them defiant survival. I'm going to turn this module into a broadcast tower, and we're going to play them a song they can't dance to. We're going to take all that pressure you just built up, and we're going to vent it in a straight line.
What do you call it?
The resolving chord.
The next 10 minutes were the most intense therapy session in galactic history. Imran stood on a crate in the room's center, a conductor. She linked every surviving synaptic bridge into a localized mesh network. Wires ran across the floor like snakes.
Listen to me.
Imran shouted, her voice ringing with authority.
Do not try to be calm. Calm is useless. I want you to be angry. I want you to look at that fleet out. I want you to look at that fleet out there. That fleet that wants to burn you because you're too sad. And I want you to get offended.
The civilians and soldiers closed their eyes.
Don't hide the fear.
Imran instructed, watching the waveforms on her tablet.
Use it. Turn it into fuel. That cold feeling in your stomach? That's not terror. That's gasoline. Compress it. Pack it down tight. Compress it. Pack it down tight.
It was frantic. It was sweaty. People shook. A chef wept silently but clenched his fist. Slater paced the room like a caged tiger, stopping to correct posture, to grab shoulders.
Tighten up. You're leaking. I want a solid block of no. You are not dying today. Refuse the order. Stubbornness is a virtue right now.
He stopped by Rhodey, the technician.
What are you scared of, son?
Dying. Alone, sir.
Rhodey stammered.
Good. Hate that feeling. Hate it so much you refuse to let it happen. Box it up and load it into the chamber.
Slowly, the chaotic waves on Imran's screen began to synchronize. It was a jagged, high-frequency, sawtooth wave, not a flat line. It hummed with a collective, silent scream of defiance. It was the sound of a species that evolved in a death world, a species that looked at predators, plagues, and ice ages and simply said, "Try me."
We have a sync,
Imran whispered.
It's not a choir, it's a riot moving in silence.
Colonel!
Corb shouted from the door.
They're boarding! Cutting through the airlock! They must have realized the probes failed!
Slater grabbed his riot shield and stun baton.
Ula's getting desperate. She knows we're up to something. She's sending in the peacekeepers.
They'll be wearing psi-dampening armor, Imran warned. The broadcast won't hurt them. They're insulated.
I know,
Slater said and cracked his neck.
That's why I'm going to hit them with a stick.
The corridor was narrow, lit by red emergency strobes. The airlock hissed open, and the Oling peacekeepers poured in. They looked terrifying, 8 feet tall, encased in bulky organic armor of interlocking blackened bone. They held heavy plasma casters. They moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. Slater stood alone in the hallway, holding a riot shield that looked like a dinner plate compared to them.
Halt!
The lead peacekeeper boomed, his voice distorted by the suit.
Submit for sterilization. You are a danger to the consensus.
Nuts, Slater barked. He charged. Slater fought like a human.
He slid under the first plasma bolt and jammed his shield's edge into the Peacekeeper's knee joint. The joint, a biological hinge, crunched. The alien roared. Slater spun and brought the stun baton down on the alien's helmet with his full body weight. The polycarbonate visor cracked. That was the key. As soon as the hairline fracture appeared, the vacuum seal broke. The Peacekeeper was suddenly exposed to Slater's raw, unshielded proximity, and Slater was currently running hot. He projected a cocktail of adrenaline, tactical calculus, and the ferocious, protective rage of a father defending his home. The Peacekeeper seized. He didn't just fall. He screamed, dropped his weapon, and clawed at his helmet as the protective aggression flooded his sensitive mind. The complexity of the emotion, violence born of love, short-circuited his binary emotional processor. It was a logic bomb made of feelings. "Next!" Slater yelled and kicked the convulsing giant aside. He fought like a demon. He used walls, momentum, and the enemy's body against each other. Each cracked visor unleashed a psychic flashbang. The corridor filled with the sound of felling armor and screaming aliens. Slater overwhelmed them, not killed them. He taught them the definition of a migraine. Slater stumbled back onto the command deck. His lip was split, bleeding down his chin, and he favored his left arm, but he grinned. "Boarding party neutralized," he wheezed. "They're napping, or hallucinating. Hard to tell." "Slater, the Star Hymnal's charged," Imran said, her voice high and tight. "We're out of time. The main lance is cycling."
"To the shuttles," Slater ordered. "All of you, now."
"The shuttles?" the diplomat cried. "We're fleeing? You said we weren't running."
"No." Slater wiped the blood from his chin. "We're not running away. We're running right down their throat."
3 small, boxy repair shuttles rocketed out of the LSM's hangar bay. They were ugly utilitarian bricks of steel, scuffed and dented. They looked like gnats charging a bonfire against the backdrop of the Oling fleet.
"Imran, now!"
Slater shouted over the comms from the lead shuttle.
"Hit the music! Open the valves!"
Imran, strapped into the co-pilot's seat next to Slater, activated the resolving cord. The bridges aboard all 3 shuttles pushed the signal to maximum gain. Every human soul on board focused on a single clear thought. We will not die today. It blasted out into the abyss. On the Star Hymnal, the effect was immediate. The point defense cannons, grown from neural reactive clusters, swiveled to track the shuttles. But as the signal hit them, they spasmed. The ship's biological brain perceived the shuttles as infinite density, not as targets. They felt like blind spots made of pure stubbornness. To the ship, they felt like black holes. The PDCs fired wildly, spraying plasma into the black, missing the shuttles by miles. The massive flagship began to convulse. The hull shivered. It gasped. The sensory input of 40 humans who refused to accept death overwhelmed its automatic nervous system.
Hangars are opening.
Corp shouted from the shuttle, too.
The ship is dilating. It's trying to vent the pressure. It's a surrender reflex.
Imran yelled, watching the bio readouts.
We're making it faint.
The shuttle screamed through the chaos and weaved through the erratic fire. They slammed onto the deck of the Star Hymnal's main hangar bay, skidding through steam and equipment. The violent impact tore up the organic flooring. Sparks flew as metal ground against biocomposite. Slater kicked the hatch open before the shuttle even stopped sliding.
Wait!
Imran shouted and grabbed his arm.
Atmosphere check.
Slater paused and glanced at the external sensor array. The hangar was vast, the force field flickering at the mouth where they had entered. A green light strobed in the console.
"Atmospheric containment holding," Slater said. "Air is rushing back in. Mask on, just in case."
He pulled on his rebreather mask and kicked the door.
"Go! Go! Go!"
The humans poured out. Oling deck crew scrambled away, vomiting silvery fluid, overwhelmed by the landing's empathetic shockwave. They couldn't even look at the humans without wincing.
"Secure the deck!"
Slater roared, his voice booming in the vast cavern as the air pressure stabilized.
"Check their vitals. We are not here to butcher them. We are here to wake them up. Stun batons only."
They moved in a tight phalanx, an island of hard, cold resolve in a sea of organic panic. The ascent to the bridge was a nightmare. The ship actively fought them. Gravity plates tilted at random angles. Bulkheads groaned and sweated. The air was thick with the smell of scorched copper and alien pheromones. Slater took point. Automated defense drones, mindless machines immune to the psychic jamming, dropped from the ceiling. Slater and the Marines dismantled them with focused kinetic violence.
Imran stayed in the center and adjusted the broadcast. She glanced at Slater's biomonitor. His heart rate hit 180. He had 3 broken ribs from the boarding action, but his mental graph remained a flat line of iron control.
How are you doing that?
Imran gasped as they pried open a convulsing door that felt warm to the touch.
Doing what?
Slater grunted and shouldered the wet metal.
Not feeling it. You're in agony.
I feel it, Doc.
Slater said, his eyes older than the stars.
I just don't let it drive. Pain is information. Nothing more.
They reached the central synaptic hub, just outside the bridge.
This is it,
Imran said.
The jamming isn't enough. The ship is going into cardiac arrest. If we don't calm it down, it'll self-destruct out of sheer panic.
Talk to it, Slater said.
I need a port.
Imran scanned the wall. She found a biosynaptic access node, a pulsing mass of nerve fibers behind a translucent membrane.
Gross,
she muttered. She stripped the bridge's wires, exposing the copper leads. She pulled a tube of conducted gel from her pocket. With a grimace, she thrust the wires into the wet, organic port. The ship shuddered violently.
I'm in,
she said, her eyes losing focus as the ship's massive consciousness brushed against hers.
I'm connected to the ship's brain. It's terrified, Slater. It thinks we mean death.
Upload it, Slater said. Show 'em we're just stubborn.
Slater breached the bridge door with a shaped charge. He stepped to the clearing blast smoke, his baton raised. High-voiced Ula stood by the captain's dais. She held Counselor Merwin by the neck. In her other hand, she held a severance blade, a humming neural disruptor pressed to Merwin's temple.
Stay back,
Ula shrieked, her eyes wild.
Stay back, monster of the abyss!
Let her go,
Slater said calmly. He stepped over the debris.
You are a disease!
Ula cried.
I will not let you infect the consensus! I will sever her before I let her become you!
Slater stopped. He looked at Ula. He looked at the blade. He saw the terror in her eyes. She feared the dark, not evil. He slowly lowered his baton. He reached up and unlatched his helmet. With a hiss of escaping air, he pulled it off. He looked tired. He looked human. A bruise formed on his jaw. Look at me, Ula, Slater said. He dropped his mental walls, just a fraction. He projected the truth of why he stood there, not hate, not the resolving chord. He projected the protective aggression. It hit Ula like a heavy weight. She gasped, her knees buckling. She felt a guardian, not a monster. She felt the terrifying paradox of a being willing to absorb the sin of violence so others could remain innocent. She felt the weight of his duty, heavy, crushing, and incredibly sad. But beneath the sadness lay love, a fierce, burning love for the people behind him.
You,
Ula whispered, her hand shaking.
You heart to save.
Every day, Slater said softly. It's part of the job.
Now, Imran,
Slater said. Imran activated the upload. She sent the human experience, not a weapon, not noise. She took the raw data of her grief, the memory of her husband, and she showed more than the pain. She showed the recovery. She showed the jokes told at the funeral. She showed the work she did afterward. She showed a child scraping a knee and getting up. She showed a soldier holding the line. She showed a widow laughing. She showed the Oline fleet, the scaffolding humans build to survive. Humor, duty, love, refusal, and the conviction to build a new day. She showed them the box served as a foundation, not a prison. It formed the bedrock upon which they built their lives. The biosynaptic network transmitted this to every Oline on the ship. The change was instant. The throbbing red emergency lighting shifted to a steady, warm amber. The groaning bulkhead settled with a deep, resonant hum. The sensation in the air shifted from a scream to a song. It felt complex, heavy, and melancholy, like a cello in a deep cave, but structurally sound. It was a sound of resilience. The panic died, replaced by a profound, somber awe. On the bridge,
The severance blade clattered to the floor. Ula fell to her knees, weeping. They were tears of beauty and resilience, not terror. Merwin rushed to her and wrapped her arms around the high voice. Merwin looked up at Slater and Imran, her large dark eyes glowing.
"It's not a plague,"
Merwin whispered, interpreting for the crew, her voice echoing through the silent bridge.
"It is an anchor. They carry the weight so the ship does not drift."
The Star Hymno powered down its weapons. Outside, the fleet followed suit, the plasma lances dimmed. Slater let out a long breath and sat on the dais steps. He checked his ribs. Definitely broken. "War's over," Slater grunted. "Does this ship have a coffee machine?" The hangar deck was quiet. Oling medical teams moved amongst the humans, wary but curious. They wore light dameters but kept reaching out to touch the soldier's armor. An Oling healer approached Slater. She hesitated, then touched his arm to treat the laceration. She winced at the static of his pain, tasting the battery acid, but she kept her hand there. She looked at him with reverence. Humanity's reputation changed in an hour from diseased to invincible. Slater sat on a crate, exhausted, letting his mental walls down just a fraction. The nearby Oling swayed like trees in a gentle wind, caught in his exhaustion's gravity. "You okay, Doc?" Slater asked Imran. Imran unplugged herself from the wall. She looked drained, but she smiled.
"We visualized the grief, Slater," she said. "Just like the grant proposal said."
"Yeah," Slater chuckled. "Yeah, next time, let's just use a PowerPoint." 3 weeks later, the Terran embassy on the Concordant Spire was under reconstruction. The walls were now lined with biosynaptic shielding to dampen the noise, but the mandatory suppressor rings were gone. Humans were allowed to be loud in designated zones. Imran and Merwin sat in the station's arboretum. The plants here sang when you touched them.
"The young ones are fascinated,"
Merwin said and poured tea.
"They call you the Stone's Mind. They try to learn how to build boxes."
"Tell them to be careful," Imran said. "If you build the box too tight, it explodes."
"We are learning,"
Merwin smiled.
"Balance is key."
Slater walked into the garden. He wore his dress uniform, his arm in a sling. The piece made him uncomfortable, but he was adjusting.
"Colonel,"
Merwin nodded. "Counselor?" Slater nodded back. "The Oling High Council just sent over a contract proposal." "Oh?" Imran asked. "They want to hire human consultants, military and civilian."
"To teach them how to repress their feelings?"
Imran asked, raising an eyebrow. "No." Slater smiled and looked out at the alien skyline where a joint patrol ship, half metal, half grown, took off into the starlight. "They want to learn how to carry them."